Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Israeli News Live, Denun Institute of Biblical Research, Rise Up Children of God. And I have a very interesting person with me today. We are welcoming Gilad Atzmon to our show. And Gilad is a world famous saxophonist, very good musician. He's also a philosopher. And we are here together to talk a little bit about the Jewish question. So welcome, Gilad.
I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And thank you for accepting the invite, Gilad. I am so excited that we got in touch and we can speak from now on. Okay, well, Gilad, I would like for you to tell your story. Tell your story to our audience. We are going to have more than one interview, successive interviews. So keep in mind, we don't have to tell everything right now. But I want your story. You were Israeli, right? You are Israeli. You're born in Jerusalem.
I was born in Israel.
Yes.
I was born in Israel many years before I realized that Israel was actually Palestine.
Right. So you speak for Palestinians. You are really not happy with what they are doing and oppressing these people.
I don't know if I speak for Palestinians. I don't speak for people. I speak for myself.
Okay.
I believe that by now we are all Palestinians.
Yes.
Because like the Palestinians, and I'm the one who really coined this, we are all Palestinians. And I believe that we are all Palestinians because like the Palestinians, we cannot even utter the name of our oppressor. And when I understood that, this led me to define the notion of Jewish power, which is very interesting because when you introduced me, you said that we are going to talk about the Jewish question. It will be very interesting to see how we define the Jewish question, what is the Jewish question, and how this question, which was a legitimate question, how this question morphed along, have been morphing in the last I would say 200 years, or should we say since even more, since European emancipation. So I spoke about us being all Palestinians. This led me to define the notion of Jewish power, and Jewish power as I define it, and I'm famous for this definition. Jewish power is the power to silence questions regarding Jewish power. So I think that with these two understandings, you pretty much know everything you need to know about Jewish question, the Jewish lobby, and why? Because there are no Jewish conspiracies. A lot of people are talking about Jewish conspiracies. There are no Jewish conspiracies. And there are no Jewish conspiracy terrorists. And why? Because everything is happening in front of our eyes. Yes. There are no secrets. They don't try to hide the fact that AIPAC is dominating American foreign policy, at least on topics that are related to their interest, to the interest of Israel, to the interest of Jewish politics, blah, blah, blah. There is no question that ADL or equivalent bodies in Britain, like the BOD, CAA, or the CRIF in France, have a huge impact on these countries' politics. Mm-hmm. Yes. All of that is done in the open. The trick is very simple. You are not allowed to mention it. You are not allowed to refer to it. You are not allowed to suggest that it may be problematic. Today, as a kind of somebody is calling me anti-Semitic because I really stood up and said the Jews must look in the mirror and ask themselves, how is it possible that I'll talk now as a Jew, I'm not a Jew, but I'll talk now as a Jew, how is it possible that we have been persecuted throughout our entire history in so many different places, in so many different countries? We were expelled from so many places.
Yes.
And what is amazing for me, and you will be probably upset by me for saying it, what is amazing for me is that I'm not original. I'm not original here. These questions are the most fundamental early Zionist questions. Zionism stood up in the late 19th century, in 1897. You know, that was the first Zionist conference, but actually things don't start in a conference. You have a conference because some people have thoughts. But let's say that we start to talk in, you know, we can talk about Pinsker, we can talk about Moses S. You know, but let's say that we start late 19th century. They stood up and they said, we have a problem. And our history looks the way it looks because the problem is inherent to us. It's not that the Goyim, the Christian, the Muslim, you know, it's us. We have to change. And at that point, there are few currents in Zionist thought. There is the socialist, or what we call labor Zionism. In early Zionism, the most, I'll just mention if you ever been in Tel Aviv. So the names that I'm going to mention now, they're all basically names of the biggest streets in Tel Aviv. So we had people like Borochov, Adi Gordon, Ber Katzenelson, of course David Ben Gurion. These people really believed that Jews should change into proletarian, authentic human beings. So they said, the problem that we have Jews is that we are too much
passive
of the capitalist type. Yeah, we are bourgeoisies. We are bankers, we are blah, blah, blah. Whether it is our fault, not our fault, maybe because we were not allowed. There are a lot of theories why Jews ended up in that kind of environment in the 19th century. There are the Marxist and the rabbinical outlook on it. Anyway, they say, we don't care. We are going to change. We are going to come to Palestine, what we call Zion, and we are going to invest in becoming farmers, in becoming factory workers. And it worked. It worked. They bought land, which is another problematic story. What happened with the Palestinians on this land, blah, blah, blah. And it worked for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, sometimes for 10 years. They were very quick to understand or to realize that there were Palestinians on the land and they were actually cheaper. And then there is a very big debate about, they call it debate on Avodah Ivrit, I spoke now with an English accent, Avodah Ivrit, which means Hebrew labor, Jewish labor, whether we can allow Palestinians, Arab, different people to work in the land, or it should be us who are working. So this is labor Zionism. There was spiritual Zionism, and they actually believed that the Jews should form kind of, and the meaning of national home should be a spiritual home, and so on and so on and so on. Now, I want to ask you a question, and this is the first time that I'm saying it. I was planning to write about it. It's going to be part of my book, but I'm kind of testing it on you. My name is Atzmon. Atzmon is not a Jewish name. You have never seen Atzmon in anywhere. I don't know where, in the diaspora history. Netanyahu is not a Jewish name. It's an Hebraic name. Peres, Barak. Do you know why I'm called Atzmon, or Netanyahu called Netanyahu, or Peres called Peres? Nobody is saying it.
Yeah.
I know
sorry.
why he's called Netanyahu.
Why? Hold on.
Netanyahu, his name was changed, from the Polish names to Netanyahu because they wanted to make it look as if he was a gift from God himself.
Well, his original
This is
name.
This is the meaning of the name. But let me tell you something that we should really make sure that a lot of people know about it. My father joined the army in '56. He went to the Air Force. At the time, all military officers in the IDF had to change their diaspora names into Hebrew names. And why? Because they wanted to cut all ties with the diaspora. The diaspora was something that they wanted to erase. And you speak Hebrew, and they called it Dchiyat Agalut, or Nigud Agalut, the negation of the diaspora. I'm now working on my new book, and there is a guy who was my top commander in the army in 82 when I was a soldier, and he was a pilot, and he speaks about his early days in the flying school in the Air Force. His name was Yaakov Turner. He ended up the commander of the Israeli police, and so on and so on. Some Israeli know him. And he said that one day he comes, in the flying school, come to the board to see what flights he has to take that day and Vizu, and he doesn't see his name. And he knows that he's on the board. And he sees that there is a new guy in the course called Yaakov Tene. They changed his name from Turner to Tene. And it took him some time to change it back. Our names were changed. It's not for me, so it's not me, it's my dad. My dad and his generation, they were changed because they were either repulsed voluntarily of the diaspora, or were ordered to behave as if they were. Okay, so if you didn't change your name voluntarily, the army will change it for you, like the way it happened with this Yaakov Turner. But by the way, I knew him as Yaakov Turner. I think that at a certain stage he managed to get his name back, which is very interesting. It's that people have family history. The thing about me is that I never understood this. I grew up in Israel.
Yeah.
And I had good childhood. It's like I really enjoyed it. Very good education. I believe that I think in a very critical manner because I was raised in Israel. And it is very interesting because just before we started the interview, you mentioned people who inspire you. And you mentioned Ilan Pape, who is an Israeli. And you mentioned Israel Shachak, who wasn't born in Israel, but was, I would say, raised in Israel intellectually. And I can give you many more names, like Shlomo Zand.
Yes.
And Amira S. And it is not a secret that the most critical voices within the Jewish world are actually coming from Israel. This was part of our education. Why it was part of our education? Because we grew up in a military society. In a military society that fights for its life. When I was 4 years old, there was a 6-day war. 7 years later, 73 war, 6 years later. In between the war of attrition, 69, start 68, at least 68, 69, early 70s. When I joined the army, 82, Lebanon, this country had to develop very quickly a generation of warriors, people who subscribe to offensive doctrine, people who can think independently. And I do think independently. Shlomo Zand thinks independently.
Yes.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how independently Ehud Barak thought when he met Epstein, but he is famous for being part of he's supposed to be kind of a very as a military leader. Ariel Sharon, whom we don't like. There is something that we have to say about him. He was a hero figure in Israel because he thought independently, and even as a prime minister, he did some very unusual thing because he thought independently.
Mm-hmm.
It was his decision to withdraw because he thought independently. He did the most unexpected thing. And by the way, Bibi Netanyahu is also a guy who definitely can fall into this rubric. He thinks independently, and this is why he has survived for so long. All right, so there is something about Israel, whether we like it or we don't like it, it gave us the most eloquent and sophisticated critics of the symptoms that bother us, that deal with the JQ. All right, so somehow I managed eventually to talk about my childhood. And by the way, as you probably know, I am a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And even when it comes to music, you know, I was living in Israel, which is a kind of a small province in the 70s. I started to play in the late 70s, 79. 80s, I'm in the army. I then leave the army. I go to university and I'm playing kind of music. And I was very successful in Israel as a musician, but I never believed that my success could translate into something on an international level. And for many years, when I came to Britain, we toured with a quartet, the Orient House Ensemble, which was ridiculous because it was a quartet, the Orient House Ensemble. I was an Israeli. My drummer was an Israeli. My bass player in Israel still plays with me. The drummer also plays with me quite often, but now we are locked down, so we don't play. We hardly play live concerts. If we do, it's live stream. And so we were three Israelis in a band and one genius British pianist, and they called me anti-Semite, and people were laughing. You know, he's playing with anti-Semites. They don't play with Jews or with Israel. You know, what are you on about? Anyway, and my band was always kind of mixed. But I remember that kind of one night we were touring all over the world, kind of for almost 20 years now with this band. And one day, kind of my drummer, Asaf, he said, Gilad, you know, sometimes I pinch myself. I can't believe we came from this Israel,
Mm-hmm.
from this province, and we are one of the best jazz bands around. And we play everywhere, and everyone wants to listen to us. We were good because we were, I cannot say that I got good music education because I started to play late. There was already very good music education in Israel. I started to play late and I became a musician very quickly. But there was somehow the way I was set mentally, intellectually, the level of dedication. It was very important for my parents to make me into and this is within the spirit of early Zionism, to make me into an art and achieving art worker, something silly and stupid. I wasn't allowed to play cards. My father would, I wouldn't allow to consider thinking about money. When my father said, "Are you going to be a speculant capitalist?" No, I had to work. So when I picked up the saxophone, and really, by the way, saxophone is not a complicated instrument, So I think that if I would decide to do the piano, it would be more difficult. Sonny Rollins, I think, started age of 22. I started saxophone when I was 17, so it's not kind of a young boy. But when I picked up the saxophone, I gave it 18 hours a day.
Wow.
All right, I gave it 18 hours a day, and within a month, I was invited to play in the biggest Israeli tour at the time with Arik Einstein. So I was playing for 1 month, and it's not because I'm a freak. It's because this is how we were educated. What is very interesting is that I moved to Britain in 94, I think. And by 2000, I had kind of 2000, 2001, 2, 3, I had kind of an international career and pretty much around that time, Israelis became very big in jazz. So now when you speak about Israelis, we're quite used to the idea that, some of my students made the international career, some of my Israeli students, some other students, but there is talent there. You cannot take it from them, but there are also a lot of problems. And the problems are those set of things that we cannot really talk about. Because we cannot talk about them, they naturally amplify themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets to the point that we are facing a disaster. And there are...
Gilad, okay, I have so many questions. They pop up, and I see your style of talking is like mine, a lot of languages in head, and you're trying to say it in English. I love it. Okay, you say you're not a Jew. A lot of people talk about you as a Jew, but you say you're not a Jew. Specifically.
I'm quite famous for being an ex-Jew, and I think that a lot of the trouble that I face is because I'm an ex-Jew, and am often described as a self-hater. And the question that I tend to ask is, even if this is true, why the fact that I don't like myself is so hurtful to you? Obviously, there is a reason. The fact Jews are really upset when some members of their, and you probably know it very well, when some members of their tribe or community or religious community, it depends, turn their back. And I think that one of the reasons is that they are very insecure about themselves as a collective, as individually. And it is very easy to explain. When you excel in something, and you get a lot of kudos for what you are, if you're a great player, a great scientist, or a great athlete, or whatever. You achieve something. You achieve something because you put a lot into it, sometimes because you're really gifted. But when you are born into excellency, i.e. chosenness, you are not so sure.
Mm.
And when someone refuses, because basically I decided that I don't want to be chosen. I don't want to be chosen. I kind of demoted myself, you know. You know, I took the rank. I said, that's it, you know, not chosen. And
So funny.
I want to be ordinary. I wanted to be ordinary. And this was very upsetting because it exposes complications and issues to do with chosenness. But I did a lot of other very, very bad things. Obviously, the bad thing that I did is to call a spade, to tell the truth. Now, I'm not claiming to tell the truth. So how can I say that I tell the truth if I'm not claiming to know the truth? Because what I'm really good at is deconstruction. I guess that it's because I was a young mathematician, kind of was very gifted in math, and I ended up studying philosophy academically and was pretty good at that. I'm kind of between these two domains, kind of philosophy and music. So while it is very, very difficult to point at the truth with confidence when it comes to reality, to issues to do with identity. In math, it's way simpler because we can define the terms, for instance. It is very, very easy to put your finger on a lie, to expose deceit. And I'll give you an example of what I did. And this is kind of when it, I think, becomes more interesting for us dealing with the JQ, because I never understood, as an Israeli, the Holocaust. Because as an Israeli, we had a conflict with the Palestinians, and at a certain stage I realized that the Palestinians were actually the indigenous people of the land. It was very clear to me. I said, you know what, I'm out of here. This is your land, bye-bye. It's not very complicated. And some people say, but by the way, right wing say, listen, it's their land, but we are stronger, so they will have to accept us, which is not ethical, but it is understandable. The people that started to confuse me were actually the Jewish left. The Jewish left.
Wow. Because they want Israel to exist, but they don't know what to do with the Palestinians, so the Palestinians will have to accept to stay, you know, I mean, all those kind of strange narratives. And I start to understand that the Jewish left always say Zionism. I'm not anti-Jew, I'm anti-Zionist, you conflate Jews and Zionism, and I say, okay. Conflate Jews and Zionism. So tell me, just so I know where Zionism ends and the Jew starts. Because I'm slightly autistic and mathematician and a philosopher, so I like things. When people speak about terms, I want either to assume that they understand the terms that they refer to, especially if they try to correct you. Right. If you say something and I correct you, you must assume that I know what I'm talking about. And I realized, obviously, that there is no clear place where Zionism ends and Judaism starts, or Jewishness ends. And if there is no dichotomy, there is no conflation. Because they're conflated.
Yes.
By definition, inherently conflated. So, and most important, I grew up in Israel. And in Israel, there is no such a thing as Zionism for people who were born in the country. We didn't know what Zionism. Zionism was an historical something. It's Herzl, Nordau, Berl Katzenelson. It didn't mean a thing for us as Israeli. Why? Because Zionism was the promise to found a national home for the Jews. This happened in 48. End of story. Zionism. I'm not making it up. This is what Zionism promised to civilize the Jews. I'm sorry for these terms, but this is how they spoke about it. To civilize the Jews, to make them into authentic, soil-oriented human beings by means of homecoming. But I was already there. So Zionism means something to diaspora Jews, but it means nothing to Israel. So we say Zionism, it's not Zionism. In Israel, in young Israel, there was one or two parties that integrated the word Zionism into their names, like Zionim Klaliim, General Zionists. In Israel, in the last 20 years, it doesn't happen. There is a Baita Yehudi, the Jewish home, Israel Betenu, Israel our home. There is obviously the Arab party. They are definitely not Zionist. It's all Jewish, different permutations of the word Jewish, and Israel calls itself the Jewish state. And if there was someone that had some confusion about it, now we have a national bill that defines Israel as the Jewish state. What I did in my book, The Wandering Who, that became a bestseller, and I got a lot of trouble for it, and I will write it again exactly the same, and I own every word I put on the page in this. I don't regret anything. What I said, if this state calls itself the Jewish state, and if this state puts Jewish symbols, paints Jewish symbols on its tanks and airplanes, the first questions that we have to ask are, what are the Jews, or who are the Jews? What is Judaism? Right. What is Jewishness? And what are the relationships between these three, and how they are related to the notion of Zionism? And this is where I started my work. What I said, Jews are the people. I myself don't talk about Jews because I don't like to talk about people. It's too complicated to talk about people. You can have a person who is a Jew and is the most wonderful human being. I met one or two in my life. It's fine. Judaism is a religion. At least theoretically, we have people like Torah Jews, Satmar, Neturei Karta, who actually, that's what I said in 2011, and maybe we'll get there. Maybe it can be questioned again, because since then few things happened. Like we see some of those communities, Jewish Orthodox communities that support Palestine, allegedly behaving quite badly in America, in Kiryat Yoel, in Monroe, in Crown Heights, and so on and so on. So we can examine what is exactly happening with these communities, but I'm not an expert on Judaism. So if you want to talk to me about the Talmud, like you mentioned Israel Shachar, we can do a bit, but I will probably at a certain stage tell you, pass, I'm not a Talmud expert. I attacked things.
I know, Gilad, you're not Talmud expert, but you know enough to tell the people that.
Of course, I will tell you very interesting things about, because I'm walking. I'm now writing a piece about really about Judaism in the context of Corona, of COVID-19.
Oh wow!
It's fascinating. I maybe we'll get there, but I just want to cover this issue of the wandering Jew, because it really, I think that the reason that this book became so popular is because I probably managed to produce the most transparent, genuine expose of the Jewish question, of the JQ, and I was accused by the Zionists.
Mm-hmm.
This was the main accusation against me, that I opened the JQ, which I did. Yeah, I did it. This is exactly what I did. Thank you. You know, I did it. I was conscious of me doing it, and I thought that this is what we have to do, because Israel is the Jewish state. It's not the Zionist state. If it's the Jewish state, we have to understand the J. So I said, Jews, the people, I don't deal with it. Judaism, the religion, I don't deal with it. Jewishness, the ideology, the culture, this is my field. Mm-hmm. And how do I deal with Jewishness? Very simple. I analyze the meaning of speeches, of films, of books, of poems, of discourses, of TV shows, of comedies. This is what I'm doing. And judging by the amount of flack that I got, I must be very good at it. Because everybody, both post-Zionist and so-called Jewish anti-Zionist, went for me. Now, why did it happen?
Gilad, let me make one statement on this, because we hear this a lot as well. You're either self-hating Jew or you're anti-Semite. And in reality, people that come from Jewish parents like yourself, I don't consider myself Jewish either, but I had parents that come from this background. But in the old saying in the South in America, no one can say anything about your family, but you can, because it's your family. And after all, Israelites, regardless of where our people may live, this is our family. And we should be able to openly speak about this critically when there is a need, and not be labeled as an anti-Semite, because it's our family, it's our heritage, it's our people.
This is one of the reasons that I decided to be ordinary. I didn't want to say, because one of the things I'm going to address it, because it's a very important. I'll do it in 93 seconds. All right. So the next question that I had to deal with, is, what are we dealing with? Okay, so we are dealing with Jewishness. And I realized that if I cannot talk about Jews, or who are the Jews, this is what the Israelis, this is what the rabbinites institutions are doing. You are a Jew, you are not a Jew, you are not Jewish enough, you cannot marry. I'm not a rabbi, I don't want to deal with these questions. I made, I would say, a Copernican revolution. Copernicus, no, this is Polish, actually, not Czech, not Czechoslovakian, but it's in the region. I changed the way we look at the JQ, and what I did, I said, instead of asking who is a Jew and who is a Zionist, and we cannot find the demarcation between the J and the Z, I said, instead of doing that, let's examine what the people who call themselves Jews, who identify as Jews, mean by that. And the guy who inspired me to go there was no other than Chaim Weizmann, the early Zionist and the first president of Israel. Chaim Weizmann famously said, in fact, he never said it as such, but this is the gist of his argument. He said, there are no French Jews, American Jews, or British Jews. There are Jews who live in France, Jews who live in Britain, Jews who live in America. So for him, to be a Jew is a primary quality. So rather than being a saxophonist of a Jewish origin, according to Chaim Weizmann, I'm a Jewish saxophonist. All right? It's a big difference. It's a big difference. But this is not how I felt, because I came from Israel. So I never identified. This is a benefit that we kind of Israelis have, is that we never had to identify other, when I was raised, as Jews, because we can identify with geography like normal people, like you Americans, like you in Czechoslovakia, sorry. Yeah, you identify with the land, with the soil, with the city. Okay, so when I started to ask who are the people who identify themselves as Jews, I came with three categories. Category number one are people who identify themselves as Jews because they believe in the Torah. I say innocent category. Category number two, people who identify themselves as Jews because they have Jewish ancestry. My mother, my father, my cousin is a Jew. I see myself as a Jew. Fine. You are not a war criminal if your mother is Jewish. You can be a war criminal, but it's not because of that. Category number three is where I got into trouble, but I own it. Category number three are people who see themselves primarily as Jews, like Chaim Weizmann, and even identify politically as Jews. And why I got into trouble? Because when I looked into category number three, I realized that JVP, all these Jewish anti-Zionists, are not anti-Zionists who happen to be Jewish. They are Jewish anti-Zionists. And here I answer your question, because I didn't want to be a Jewish anti-Zionist. I was anti-Zionist, not because I'm a Jew, it's not in my blood. I was anti-Zionist or pro-Palestinian, if you want that. I don't like this anti-Zionist. Pro-Palestinians because I saw in my eyes the way Palestinians were treated, and not because of my Jewish values, because I know nothing about Jewish values. And I actually would argue that there is no such a thing. And actually, Shayaw Leibovich would agree with me. I'm just writing about him. There are no Jewish values. There are Jewish commandments.
Wow.
Judaism is very different. Judaism is very different from Islam and Christianity in that regard. In Judaism, we have decrees. We have 613 mitzvot that replace ethical thinking. But we will get into it, maybe not today, maybe another time if you still want to talk to me. Okay? And here, this is exactly where we got into this issue that Stephen raised. I didn't want to come up with this argument as a Jew. I don't agree with what is happening to. No, every human being should be upset by what is happening in Palestine.
Yes.
Every human being should be upset by what AIPAC is doing,
Yes.
And from that point, I actually realized, and I was vocal about it, that the Jewish left and the Jewish anti-Zionists, and you probably also get some trouble from them. I don't know, I'm guessing.
Yeah. They don't.
are actually primarily concerned with tribal interests, and they operate as a control opposition. Their job is to clean people like you and every person with a bit of sense from the Palestinian solidarity movement. And I tell you, I've probably been there in the Palestinian solidarity, kind of involved in Palestinian solidarity discourse before you. And when I kind of joined this discourse, I never been part of any organization. We had the most incredible intellectuals involved in this discourse. Today, nowadays, it's a desert. You can't imagine the quality of discussions and by the way, they did exactly the same thing to the American, the British, the French, to the Western left. Left is now a complete desert.
Yes.
You listen to Jordan Peterson, whether you agree with him or not, the level of intellectual engagement is something that we don't see at all in the progressive and left discourses. They really worked hard to shoot themselves not in the foot, but between the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and this is a lot. This is why the world is in such a devastating state. Okay, sorry. I spoke so much. Sorry.
Okay, all right, listen. I want to tell people a few things. Steve did identify as a Jew until he really fully understood that when he speaks against anything critically about what State of Israel does or what Talmud teaches, they attack him, and to the point that persecution now is becoming very severe. So that's why he does not identify as a Jew. So we need to understand what it means to be a Jew, what the definition of that is in reality. And you are trying to explain this. I also like few phrases you have coined. We are all Palestinians. I think that's your phrase. I like that. You also said there are no Jewish values, but there are Jewish commandments. I also like that one.
That's very good.
And then also you have said something while you are speaking, and I want you to tell us more about it. You said that if we don't quickly define this and deal with this, there is a coming disaster. What are you talking about?
I think. Okay, I will. I wrote a paper yesterday about. I published a paper yesterday about.
Where can we find your published papers? I need to know.
And on Gilad.online.
Gilad.online. Okay.
Yeah. This is my website, and I want to kind of address 2 or 3 of the topics that you mentioned together. I'll tell you about something that I'm writing right now because, and you may not accept where I'm going, because to a certain extent, you know, I'm an ex-Jew. I'm very inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Very inspired. I'm totally inspired by the Spirit of Christ.
Well, that melts my
but
heart.
I never felt. Sorry, what did you say?
I just said that what you just said melts my heart.
Fine, but I never managed to join a church.
That's good.
Because it felt too Jewish to me. And I could never define it.
You
All
said
right.
you said what my probably yes.
And I realized that I'm not the first Jew who came with such an observation. Now, there is a small leap here, but I think that you will agree with me. Since 2000, 2001, let's say, things really changed. And every few weeks, there is a new apocalyptic disaster that is inflicted or imposed on us, and we are asked to deal with it as a global collective. So in 2001, obviously, we had 9/11, and immediately the neocons or the Ziocons identified Islam and the Islamists, as they call them, as the global threat, and we had to all join forces. I was living in Britain, and Britain fell into this nonsense, and we started a world war against Islam. We didn't manage to recover from that. We had a global melting, economy melting, and we were all kind of under the threat of a global poverty. As soon as we start to see that we managed to survive, there was another apocalypse. It was global warming. We are basically grilled, you know?
Yes.
And all the time ISIS became a global threat, and now we have COVID.
Yeah.
Now, we are more or less, I guess, the same age, 10 years difference or something like that. We've been here, we've been around before 9/11, and we don't remember being tormented or threatened or existentially threatened by these global disasters that apply to all of us. Now, why do they do it? First, if you're living in a globalist world, it is only natural that you will be tormented or threatened by global disaster. Because whether there is a global government or this global government is aware, I don't think that there is a global government, but there's definitely globalist powers that want us to be threatened by these global elements. Now, we don't understand yet how this global thing working. I'm one of the first one to write about it, about the structure of apocalypse now. That happens kind of, it's not apocalypse now, it's apocalypse on a daily basis.
Right.
And it's quite, I think that, when you read about plagues in history, with people coming to the street and dead people in the road, we are not there. No one, and don't say that no one dying, but in my street, I didn't see dead people in the street yet. Okay? There is something, and we are dealing with it. I started to look into it and to think about it. And I realized that I'm quite familiar with it. Why I'm so familiar with it? Because I grew up in Israel. And in Israel, when it comes to Orthodox Jews, we call them Yehudi Chared, which means really frightened Jew or dreading Jew. In Hebrew, you say, Ashrei Ish Yareh Tamid. This is from Proverbs 28:14. Blessed is the one who always trembles before God, but whoever hardens their heart falls into trouble. In Judaism, God is a very scary entity. Now, the next question is why the Jews believe in such a scary entity. Now, I'm slightly different to you because I'm attacking issues from philosophical perspective. So I could even take the agnostic or the Epicurus approach and said, the next question, why, this is the agnostic approach, why did they invent a God who is so frightening? And if they invented a God who is so frightening, why do they keep believing in him? These are legitimate questions. I'm not trying to get you into to embarrass you or to get you into a religious or theological debate. But these are legitimate questions that we ask and we should ask. In Judaism, the fear of God is elementary. And then Judaism is set in a very different way to other religions, other belief systems. In fact, I actually believe, and I'm not alone, the Judaism is a faith, but it's not a belief system. And why it's not a belief system? Because in Christianity, you have in Islam, and this is why when I hear Judeo-Christian, I get annoyed. There is Islamo-Christian. In Christianity and in Islam, the deity notion, the deity substance, is a merciful God. In Judaism, we don't know what it is. And this is very, very crucial. I'm going back now to Maimonides.
Maimonides, that's the Rambam, right? Rambam.
Yeah, the Rambam, Maimonides.
Mm-hmm.
The philosophy, and it's very clever. It's not that Judaism is stupid, not at all. In fact, the one thing with these problematic issues with Judaism and with the Jewish disastrous history, Jews are here for 3,000 years and they see civilization after civilization. Civilizations are way more sophisticated than them disappearing completely. And they stay. They stay because there is something very solid, very, I don't say ethical, there is no ethics. Very solid, very strong on the survival, and we can deal with it. I actually walked on it on The Wandering Goo and in Being in Time. In Christianity and Islam, loving God, accepting God is a voluntary act. In Judaism, it's a mitzvah. It's an order. You accept God. Mitzvah number 1, believe in God.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Believe in God.
Yeah, they even.
Now,
yeah, go ahead.
It's very interesting. Why? Why? The most sophisticated Jewish Orthodox teacher, a real genius, and he's not with us anymore, is a guy called Professor Yeshayahu Leibovich. Are you familiar with this name?
I am.
Yes.
I am.
Okay. The Yeshayahu Leibovich insight into these issues is crucial, and he is actually inspired by Maimonides. In Judaism, and this is very much identical with Immanuel Kant understanding. What Immanuel Kant says, actually 300 years after, I don't know, after Maimonides, maybe more, right? 600 years. He says, if God is beyond space and time, And we people are spatio-temporal. We can understand reality within the notion of time and space. There is nothing about God existence that can relate to our existence. So we cannot basically say anything about God. And this is something that is very fundamental to Jewish Orthodox. They say Holocaust, that's what God wants. No, they accept the Holocaust, which is very interesting. And they accept everything. Yeah? Something happened. By the way, a lot of Muslims are the same. You know, I spoke about it with a Muslim friend. He said, man, this is why we are not getting excited by this corona, by this COVID-19. He said, this is what God wants. I said, fine. You know, I cannot, if God wants it like that, that's the way it is. And the question is whether America and Israel, didn't try to make some kind of a WMD weapon, but this is another question. Ishayahu Leibovich understood that this is how Maimonides understood the notion of God. You cannot understand the way of God is the way God thinks, the way God sees the things. And this is why, instead of trying to deal with these issues to do with deity or theological questions, trying to find the logos that we are so familiar with scholastic thinkers, with Aquinas, in Christianity. In Judaism, they invented a different way to deal with it. Mm-hmm. They came with a set of mitzvot, actually 613, that are commandments. What is the difference between commandments and a law? That a law, a good law, is supposed to unveil its logos voluntarily. Mm-hmm. So if I tell you, for instance, listen, you cannot drive more than 70 miles per hour in this motorway, said, it makes sense. By the way, it never made sense to me because I always thought that if the roads are so dangerous, so you have to spend as little time as possible on the road, so you have to drive as fast as you can. This is my logic.
I like this philosophy.
But anyway, but you understand where the silly people come with the law. All right? When it comes to Judaism, there are laws. And then, I don't know, Steve, if you remember, you say, Naseh v'nishma. First we do, then we ask, then we question. Mm-hmm. All right? Now I'm trying to put all of that together. When you look at our reality, when you look at the COVID-19 and the apocalyptic narratives, nothing makes sense. Right. Nothing makes sense. How is it possible that suddenly, in the last 20 years, we are moving from apocalyptic global narrative? We never had it before. We had problems with America and Russia. It was anti-globalist. By the way, Marxism tried to put us together as a global united. Now the post-Marxists actually try to separate us, and it's global capitalism that tried to unite us. It never happened before. When you have a life religion or a life setting that is based on fear, we have to move people into a setting that resembles Torah and mitzvot. And this is exactly where we are now. We are all Jerusalemized. I should define what is Jerusalem. I'll do it in a second. We are all Judified. I will say it in more radical. We are all Judified. We are all Hebretized. Mm-hmm. We are all subject to this apocalypse philosophy. Mm-hmm. And the way this system is sustained is through Torah and mitzvot. So you cannot go out, you have to put face mask. What is a face mask? Face mask is a modern skull cap. When you put the first mask, you identify with the fear, you identify with the religion, you become like the Orthodox Jew who trembles.
You know, that's so funny. Wow.
Let me do a couple of things on this, Atzmon.
It's frightening.
Think about that. I had my face mask on my head, is just as showing my father-in-law as a little joke. I said, see, I can be Jewish in daytime, and I slid it right down, and I can keep COVID. So,
Yeah.
but
it can go from here to there.
All right. So now, two terms. Again, it's not terms that I invented,
wait a
but
minute.
I brought them back to light. It's Athens versus Jerusalem. Athens, and this is where I'm trying to upset you, kind of the live for 1 hour. I don't manage, but this may upset you, but because, or maybe it shouldn't upset you. It should make you sad, and it should make you think. This is what I really want people to do. You know, if I'm not an activist, I despise activism, you know, because they always know the answers. For me, to understand things is to learn how to question, how to refine questions. And when you think that you go to the right question, it means that you are ready to refine your question and to move deeper into the unknown. Activists are doing the opposite. They always give answers. Two crucial notions that are fundamental to my work, and I'm famous for them. They were not invented by myself. It's a German 19th century discourse that was brought to America by actually no other than Leo Strauss, who is the father and the mother of the neoconservatism school. He was himself a student of Heidegger. Athens is the city of philosophy, is the birthplace of philosophy, Western philosophy, science, poeticism, ethics, tragedy. Jerusalem, within this dialectic, is the city of revelation, where you get the Torah, you get the rules, litigation. Athens teaches us how to think for ourselves. Jerusalem teaches us what to say and what not to say. This is the mitzvot. Now, you may agree with me or not, Christianity and Islam are full with Jerusalem. It's not just Judaism is Jerusalem. We have litigation in Christianity, some churches more, some churches less. Maybe Quakers are the best on that front. Maybe Catholic are more strict. I'm not an expert on Christianity. We definitely have litigation in Islam. Sharia is very similar to Halakha. And what I think is that because of that, both Christianity and Islam are not the ideal candidates to fight the Jerusalemite moment in which we are struggling with. And it seems to me, and I'm telling you something, it's really, really far out. It seems to me that the people who are striking hard and come with the most unusual thoughts, they are, maybe take it metaphorically or literally, they are the pagans amongst us. People like David Icke. People told David Icke, you're going to talk about reptiles, and yeah, okay, he speaks about reptiles. Where's the problem talking about reptiles? Where's the problem talking about animals? This is exactly what pagans do. They see walls with gods, with nature, with women having love affair, with gods, with animals. And I think that the spiritual shock, and they're not stupid, yeah, they're not stupid. They don't think that, that lizard are kind of coming to your house in the night and doing the Epstein thing. All right? All right? They're not stupid.
Yes.
It is a way of openness to the world that is our only hope for a shift. And I guess that a lot of people are interested in my work, despite the fact that I'm called the most horrible names, anti-Semite, because I think differently, yet I make sense. I make a lot of sense.
Yes.
And when people listen to me, they say, we knew it all along. Every time I speak to people, I could see your reaction, Yana. It's like, you said, oh my God, yeah, it's that. You just kind of a second ago. Because I have this maybe talent, maybe I'm working out on it, I don't know, maybe it's the way I question things. I have this ability to make things simple. This is why I play jazz, I listened to Charlie Parker. It was fascinating, and I made it simple to my ears by trying to analyze it. This is why I teach music in 5 lessons.
I want to go back
Oh my
to one
goodness,
issue.
Gilad.
No, that's the way, in the lockdown, I decided to give workshops. I said, I'll tell you I'm not playing now, kind of. So now I'm playing again, but I said, I'll tell people everything I know, if maybe I'll never play again, and I gave 5, 6, 7 master classes on the net, and after that I was empty. I felt I have nothing to say.
Wow. Well, I understand you. Yes.
I wanted to double back on one thing, because I lost my thought for a second. But Gilad, when you were speaking about the as far as Judaism, it's law, and one of the big issues that we've dealt with amongst the Christian groups, the Messianic group specifically, is they are trying to move the Christian people underneath Talmudic rabbis so that they can place them under the law. And they're telling them that, until the Messiah comes and straightens everything out, the law is to come out of Jerusalem, so therefore you have to go under the law. And I think that this may be, especially after listening to what you're saying, I feel like that even the COVID issue, all the things that they're doing, that was probably one of the plans they needed to get them out of their free thinking, those Christians able to think free, and to put them back under the law and have a way to justify it.
Of course, I'm totally with you. America was the land of the free. You are now the land of the political correctness. What is political correctness? It's politics.
Yes.
That doesn't allow political opposition. What is COVID? COVID is something that doesn't allow political opposition. When I'm on Facebook and I want to post an article about COVID or whatever, there is a window coming. What you're posting includes the word COVID-19. If you want to know about COVID-19, this is the place to go. This is the halacha.
Yes.
Zuckerberg is telling us this is halacha. This is the halacha. If you're doing that, you are an heretic force. regardless, he doesn't even know what I'm going to post.
You absolutely
And they because it is halacha is built like an algorithm, and COVID is built like algorithm, and global warming is set like algorithm, and 9/11 is set like algorithm. So we know the Muslim, we have the profile of the. I'm not saying that it is. It is set, the narrative, the discourse, the apocalypse narrative is set like that. Then it is not even, the Jews were lucky because they had a rabbi that would have to judge whether I'm an heretic character or not. But Zuckerberg has robots that are doing it. We are the most miserable people in the history of humanity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because AI is controlling everything. AI has no soul, no anything. They just have algorithms and predictions. Like the whole COVID, Gilad, if you remember back in March, they were coming with speeches, millions of people will die. The original prediction was that 2.2 million Americans will die from COVID, and it was based on algorithms. It was based, the prediction was based on computer algorithms. Nothing happened.
I wrote a lot about it. I analyzed it back in March. I argued back in March that our Neil Ferguson in the UK and Fauci, they are anti-scientific charlatans. They are just, let's now talking in, they are kind of rabbinical forces within this new apocalyptic religion. And if this apocalyptic scenario will collapse, and I think that it is collapsing because the 2 million, thanks God, didn't die, not here and not in the UK and nowhere else. And now there is another thing. And, there is this study by the CDC that only 6% Americans, of the American fatalities, were from COVID-19 per se. But they say it's, that let's say that you have cancer, God forbid, or something, and you are on your deathbed, and it is more than likely, usually, that you will die from an infection or from a winter flu, because your body is very, very weak. Now, when it comes to COVID, we didn't do that. So if your relative had cancer and he died, they said, yeah, it wasn't the cancer, it was the flu, but yes, it was the cancer. When it happened with COVID, we made all of those into COVID. We were basically fiddling with the number. Why we were fiddling with the numbers? Because we are now living in a world after 3,000 years of science that started in Athens. It didn't start in Jerusalem. It started in Athens. Jerusalem gave nothing to science until the emancipation of the Jews. Yeah?
Yes.
Right.
All right? It had no part in it, in this development of this incredible thing. It's not, they just didn't have science. They didn't have science because, and it's very interesting question, why they don't have science and why they still in yeshivas, they don't have science. They have a different way, and as long as the other people doing science, it's okay. Technology is exactly how we, rather than dealing with these COVID things as a health crisis, the first question that we ask is how we turn this thing into a cash machine. And all this mess that we are seeing all the time, and the numbers, and we make all people dying in America and in Britain and in France, we make them into COVID, is part of this scenario. And I say something about Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter.
We are not either.
But of course, but there is something that bothers me about this guy. Is all the time happen to be right for the wrong reasons. For the wrong reason. It's not that he's right because he's kind of give it a lot of thought, and he's kind of analyzing C-19, COVID-19 scientifically, and no, it's because the people who are against him are so corrupted. So just him being on a survival mission, he happens to land on the right decisions, or saying the right thing. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing, and he did the same thing happened with Israel and Palestine. Like they had two states. We are pro-Palestinians. He did the worst thing he could do for Palestine. Yeah, Jerusalem, blah blah blah. The next week we realized that the Palestinians said, you know what? We don't want two states, right of return. We are back to square one. Donald Trump managed to revive the Palestinian discourse and liberate the Palestinian discourse from its Jewish solidarity. So it's quite a very interesting guy. It will be fascinating to see if he's going to win the election.
Yeah. Well, hold on, just for the sake of people, and I
will have to end soon, but I'm happy to talk to you anytime you want.
Well, Gilad, listen, I think we should have several sessions because I still need more on Talmud from you.
I gotta have one by myself with Gilad.
You have one by yourself, and I so
of course. You realize that I'm really not Talmud expert. I wish I was, but I've never been a religious a Jew, and I never followed the Talmud. I was actually the complete opposite. I was raised to reject the Jewish upbringing. I was raised to be an Israeli, to be the antidote to the diaspora narrative, and this is what we Israelis of my generation, what we call Sabra or whatever, which is Sabra, another problematic notion. What is Sabra? You know what is Sabra? Where it comes from, the word Sabra,
Yes.
It's the cactus that is actually related to the Palestinian. It's the most Palestinian thing ever. So they can, so yeah, we can talk about a lot of things, but I can talk to you about my rejection of this Jewish ethos, but I'm not an expert on Talmud. I just make sure that.
Oh, no, I didn't mean it in that sense. I know you're not expert on Talmud, but you do understand that Talmudic influence has a lot to do with what Jewish state is today and what it's doing, especially to non-Jews.
My new book is actually about that. I am trying to analyze.
That's what
we can talk about it. I'm analyzing the shift between the state of the Israelis into the Jewish state. This process that happened between 67 to 77. I think that this is a very fundamental shift in Israel, and we can talk about it. If you want to be ready, I can. There are a few talks that I gave in America about it. So yeah, we can discuss.
So
this
in
issue.
that sense, I asked you, and also you said that we are all in danger unless we really stand up. I mean, just as a very, in conclusion, if we as people, you see how persecuted we are. We had punishment on YouTube. We were down for a week on one channel. Now we are down for a week on another channel, all because we're bringing these questions out, or we say something that they don't like, they take us down. So what can we do? What kind of danger would you say to people that are listening right now? What kind of danger we are in if we don't stop?
Listen, I believe that we are all kind of facing the same kind of persecution, and this persecution is exactly the fundamental. Uh, I am the fundamental modus operandi that has been sustaining Jerusalem throughout its entire history. This is the system, and the system, this system was implemented against Christ. I don't have to tell you about that. And this system was implemented against Spinoza, against Marx, against basically the best people in the history of humanity, against Norman Finkelstein, against you guys. It's not nice if I say that I'm counting myself together with Christ and Spinoza, but I've done it before, so why not?
Yeah.
This is the when people are trying to deal with these issues, they should expect to be subject to some nasty measures. If you are not built for it, do something better with your life.
Mm-hmm.
If it's important for you, important enough for you, be ready to accept it. It's not nice what I'm saying, but I can tell you that nobody remember the name of the rabbis that excommunicated Spinoza. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And not many people remember, obviously some of us remember, the names. We remember one, the names of the Sanhedrin that are responsible for Jesus Christ's plight. We remember Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
We remember Marx. We remember the few Jews and few others who stood up against supremacy, against chosenism. And I don't do it. I myself, it's very important. I don't do it because I want to be part of history. I'm doing it not because I want to save the world even. I'm fascinated by the world. I'm fascinated by what is happening to us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a musician. I'm a musician who play until March. I played every night or something like 300 nights, and then for the first time in my life, I was kind of 4 months at home without a gig, and I had the most incredible time of my life. I didn't realize that people can sleep in one place for 4 months. I've never done it in my life since I was in my adult life, and I read a lot, and I think that a lot of people everybody is seeing what is happening here. The more they fight anti-Semitism, the more people develop antagonism. How do I know? Because 20 years ago, anti-Semitism wasn't an issue. Everybody loved to love the Jews, and everybody thought about the Holocaust. And now, according to the Jewish statistics, every 5 person is holding anti-Semitic views. This is what they are saying, not me. Every 4th person doesn't believe that the Holocaust is exaggerated, and so on and so on. So the more they are pushing, the more they unveil what their philosophy and those things that made their history pretty sad. Mm-hmm. It's a tragic thing. What is tragedy? Tragedy is that you see a timeline of destruction, and there is nothing you can do, and there is nothing we can do.
So Gilad, you think this is gonna go fully? I mean, we are already so far into this, and this Jewish power is over us. Nobody see. You say a lot of people see it, but you know, you would be surprised, even in Christianity, and of course, Christianity is a general term because there's so many denominations. But I would say 99% of Christians in America and in America are under this Jewish influence. Okay, there's
As I mentioned before, it's not because they are bad people, it's because Christianity is also Jerusalemite to a certain extent, or Jerusalem, I should say, and so is Islam. And it's very likely, despite the fact that Christianity was quite effective, the Catholic Church was quite effective to deal with these issues for 1800 years, I don't think that Christianity is our emancipatory force. I'm happy to. I'm analyzing it philosophically. I'm not a prophet. I may be wrong. I'll have to go. I'll have to go now. But but it was fascinating talking to you. I'll be delighted to talk to you whenever.
Let's do it again, because I want you to speak your heart more, and I have more questions, of course. So let's
appreciate it tremendously. And
yes. And again, before we go, your website, Gilad,
GILAD.online.
Only one L?
Online, yeah.
No, one L.
Gilad, yeah, GILAD, yeah.
GILAD.online, and everything, your books, your articles, everything can be found there?
Yeah. My articles, everything. If you want to see my latest writing, they are on the magazines. And if you want my music, it's in the shop, I think. Yeah, it's a very big site.
We'll put it in the description below, friends. For those of you that are listening.
How about YouTube? You have YouTube.
I'm still on YouTube. You have my music there and some of my thoughts. I had a lot of videos removed. If I make a video and it's not removed from video, I know that I didn't tell the truth. You know, it means that I have to really work harder.
You got to do it over again.
What's the name of your YouTube?
I don't know. I think that it's just my name, Gilad Atzmon.
Okay, Gilad Atzmon. Well, thank you, Gilad. We'll put links in the description, and thank you all for
listening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.